My brother Wilder cried louder at our father's funeral than any other person in the church. He sat in the front row, 2 seats down from me, and he sobbed in a way that I had not seen him cry since we were children. His shoulders shook. His face was wet. He kept his head down for most of the service. People around us, my aunts and my older cousins and the men my father had worked with for 40 years at the hardware store, watched him out of the corners of their eyes. I knew what they were thinking because I was thinking it too. They were thinking that my brother had not spoken to my father for 12 years, and that he was now performing a grief he had not earned, and that the performance was so loud because he was probably trying to position himself for the will reading the following Tuesday. I had been thinking that exact thought for the entire service. I had been judging my brother in the back of my head while the priest spoke about my father. I had been preparing, in my own mind, for the fight I assumed was coming at the lawyer's office on Tuesday morning. I had been ready to call my brother out, in front of the lawyer and our extended family, for being the kind of man who could ignore a parent for 12 years and then cry at his funeral like a Sunday school child. I was wrong about my brother. I was wrong about the 12 years. I was wrong about almost everything I thought I knew about the relationship between my brother and my father. And I would not find out how wrong I had been until the lawyer opened a sealed envelope at the will reading and read out loud, in his careful, steady voice, a letter my father had written 6 months before his death. The letter rearranged the last 12 years of my family. It also rearranged me. I have been living inside that rearrangement for the last 7 months, and I am going to try to tell you the story honestly, because I think there are people listening who have a brother or a father or an uncle or a son who they have decided is the cold one, the absent one, the one who left, and who may be living a different version of that story than the version the family has agreed on. My name is Linnea Callio. I am 36 years old. I am a school counselor at a small public high school in northern New England. I have spent the last 14 years sitting across desks from teenagers who are trying to figure out how to live inside families that do not know how to talk to each other. I am pretty good at my job. I would have told you, before my father died, that I understood my own family at least as well as I understood the families I worked with professionally. I would have been wrong. Before I tell you what was in that letter, hit subscribe, and tell me one thing in the comments. Tell me about a relationship in your own family that looked like estrangement from the outside, but turned out to be something else once you finally got close enough to see what was actually happening between the two people in it. I read every comment. Now let me take you back to the day my brother walked out of my parents' house 12 years ago, and the way the men in my family stopped talking to each other on what looked like a Sunday afternoon, but what was actually the beginning of a long, quiet conversation that nobody else was allowed to hear. I want to tell you about my father first. The story does not work without him. My father's name was Axel Kallio. He was 79 years old when he died. He had been born in 1944 in a small town in Minnesota, in a Finnish-American community where most of his neighbors had emigrated from Finland in the 1920s, including his own parents. He had moved to northern New England in his 30s for a job at a small lumber mill, and he had ended up, by an accident of an old friend's invitation, buying a small hardware store in a town of about 4,000 people, where he and my mother had raised my brother and me. The hardware store was called Kallio Hardware. It had a small wooden sign that my grandfather had carved by hand in 1976. My father had repainted that sign every 5 years for 48 years. He repainted it the spring before he died. The sign is still hanging there. My father was a Finnish-American man of his generation, which means he was a particular kind of quiet. There is a Finnish word for it. The word is Sisu. It is sometimes translated as stubbornness, or grit, or determination. The actual word is closer to a kind of stoic endurance that is so deep it does not need to announce itself. My father had Sisu. He never raised his voice. He rarely complained. He worked 12 hours a day at the hardware store for 48 years. He raised 2 children. He buried his wife, my mother Hilma, when I was 26 and Wilder was 29. He had not remarried. He had not dated. He had simply continued to go to the hardware store every morning, 6 days a week, until the morning his heart stopped in the back room while he was inventorying a delivery of plumbing fittings. My father did not say "I love you" out loud. I want you to know that because the story does not make sense unless you understand it. He did not say it to my mother. He did not say it to me. He did not say it to my brother. He did not say it to my husband, Cal, who he had genuinely liked for the 11 years we had been married. The Finnish-American men of my father's generation, where I grew up, did not say those words. They expressed love in the only ways they had been taught how to express it. They built things. They fixed things. They showed up. They worked. They were quiet at the kitchen table. They paid the mortgage on time. They were the people you could count on, in 1,000 small ways, who would die before they would tell you, in plain English, that they loved you. I want you to understand that, because what my brother and my father had been doing with each other for 12 years was the same thing my father had been doing with all of us his whole life. They had been loving each other in the ways the men in our family had been taught to love. The methods were not visible to anybody except them. My brother Wilder is 3 years older than me. He is now 39. He had grown up working at the hardware store on Saturdays the way I had. He had been my father's apparent heir for most of his childhood. The assumption in our family had been that Wilder would eventually take over the store. My father had assumed it. My mother had assumed it. The town had assumed it. Wilder had not assumed it. Wilder had wanted to be a furniture maker. He had been making small wooden things in our garage since he was 12 years old. By the time he was 16, he had been building chairs and small tables that the town had been buying from him at our church's annual craft fair. He had been quiet about wanting to do it as a career, in the way my father had taught both of us to be quiet about everything. When Wilder was 27, he had asked my father, at a Sunday dinner, for an investment. He had wanted to start his own carpentry workshop in a small town an hour from where we had grown up. He had researched the costs. He had brought a one-page business plan written in my brother's small, careful handwriting. He had asked our father for $40,000. He had told our father he would pay it back within 5 years, with interest if necessary. He had told our father that he would never ask him for anything again if our father said yes. My father had said no. He had not said no with cruelty. He had said no the way my father said no to everything he was unsure of, which was carefully and once. He had told my brother that the carpentry workshop was a bad idea. He had told him that the market for handmade furniture was too small to support a business. He had told him that he would be making a mistake if he left a steady job at the hardware store to chase a hobby. He had told him, without using the word, that he did not believe in him. My brother had stood up from the dinner table. He had not raised his voice. He had said, "Dad, you have been waiting my whole life to tell me you do not believe in me, and you have finally done it, and now I am going to leave. You will not see me again until you understand what you said tonight." He had walked out of the house. He had not come back. For 12 years. I want to tell you what I thought for those 12 years because I want to be honest about how wrong I had been. I had thought my brother was a coward. I had thought he had been unable to handle one disappointment from our father, and that he had taken it personally in the way men of his age took everything personally, and that he had punished my father with 12 years of silence because he had been incapable of doing the harder work of showing up and continuing to be a son. I had thought my father, in his own quiet way, had grieved Wilder more than my mother. I had watched my father age and fast forward in the years after Wilder left. He had gotten thinner. He had gotten quieter. He had stopped going to family dinners at my house after a while because he had not wanted to sit at a table where Wilder's chair was empty. I had been angry at my brother. I had not contacted him for years in solidarity with my father. I had heard from my older cousin, who had stayed in occasional contact with Wilder, that the carpentry workshop had eventually opened, and that it had eventually succeeded, and that Wilder had built it into a small but profitable business making custom furniture for clients up and down the East Coast. I had received this information without congratulating my brother. I had filed it away as evidence of his selfishness. He had succeeded without us. He had built a life that did not include the family he had walked out on. He had punished my father by being publicly fine, in the way you can be publicly fine on the internet without ever having to send a single text message to the people who had raised you. I had been wrong about every part of it. I will get to that in a moment. My father died on a Tuesday morning in October. He had been at the hardware store. He had been alone. He had been counting plumbing fittings into small plastic bins. The mailman had found him. The mailman had been bringing the daily mail to the front counter and had walked back to the storeroom because nobody had been at the counter and had found my father on the concrete floor between two shelving units. He had been gone for about 20 minutes by the time the mailman found him. The coroner had ruled the death a heart attack, sudden and complete. He had not suffered. I had gotten the call at school. I had been in the middle of a meeting with a parent. The principal had come in to take the meeting over. I had driven home in a fog. I had called my husband Cal. He had met me at our house. He had held me for a long time. We had not gone to the hardware store. We had gone instead to my father's small empty house, the house I had grown up in, and we had sat in the kitchen, and I had cried at the table where I had eaten breakfast every morning of my childhood, and Cal had made me tea, and he had held my hand while I had not been able to speak. I had not been the one to call Wilder. The funeral home had called him. They They had his number on file as the next of kin, along with mine. I had not known that. I had not asked. I had been at my father's house when Wilder had called me, 2 hours later. I had answered. He had said, "Linnea." Then he had not been able to say anything else. We had been on the phone for almost 10 minutes without speaking. I had been crying. He had been crying. We had been crying together on a phone call after 12 years of saying nothing to each other. That had been the first phone call. I had not said much except, "Are you coming home?" He had said yes. He had said he would be there in a day. He had said he was leaving immediately. He had hung up. He had arrived the following afternoon. He had hugged me at the airport. We had not talked much in the car. I had been polite. I had not been warm. I had been carrying 12 years of resentment in my chest and a freshly dead father, and the impossibility of figuring out what I felt about my brother in a single car ride from the regional airport. I had been planning to be civil through the funeral. I had been planning to confront him after. The funeral was the following Saturday. The church was full. My father had known almost everybody in our small town for 50 years. My mother's family had come up from Minnesota. My father's old friends from the lumber mill had driven in from various parts of the state. The hardware store had been closed for 2 days, with a small handwritten sign on the door that read, "Closed for Axel Callio's memorial, reopening Monday." Wilder had cried throughout the service. I had told you about that. I want to tell you what I noticed about his crying in retrospect, that I had not registered at the time. He had not been performing. The crying had not been theatrical. It had been the kind of crying that happens when somebody has been holding something for years and the holding has finally become impossible. It had been the kind of crying that came from somewhere deep enough to be embarrassing in public. He had been embarrassed. He had been trying to muffle it. He had not been succeeding. I had judged it as performance because that had been the story I had decided he was inside. I had needed his crying to be performance because if it was not performance, I had to start asking myself what it was. I had not been ready for that question yet. The will reading was the following Tuesday. We met at the office of my father's lawyer, Mr. Theodore Kekkonen. Mr. Kekkonen had been my father's lawyer for 30 years. He had also been my father's friend. They had played chess together once a week for the last 11 years of my father's life, in the back room of the hardware store on Wednesday afternoons. Mr. Kekkonen had cried at the funeral too, in the back row, where I had not noticed him until the recessional. His office was on the second floor of a small brick building above a coffee shop. There was a narrow staircase. There was a small waiting room with 2 chairs. There was a window that looked out over the street where I had grown up walking past on my way to school. I had been in that office once before, when I was 20, when my father had updated his will after my mother's death. I had not been back since. Mr. Kekkonen had asked Wilder and me to come together. He had said the will was simple. He had said there were a few specific bequests, and that we would walk through them in order. He had also said, when he had called me the night before, that my father had left a sealed letter to be opened at the reading. He had said the letter had been written 6 months earlier. He had said my father had given him strict instructions. The letter was to be read aloud at the will reading, in front of both of his children, before any of the legal documents were addressed. I had not known what to do with that. I had not asked Wilder if he had known about the letter. We had not been talking enough yet to share information. We sat across from Mr. Kekkonen at his desk. The desk was old. It was a heavy oak desk that I would later realize my brother had built, although I had not known it that day. Mr. Kekkonen had a folder in front of him. He had taken out a sealed cream-colored envelope. The envelope had my father's careful handwriting on the front. It said only, "To be read aloud in front of Linnea and Wilder before anything else. Axel." Mr. Kekkonen looked at us. He said, "Your father asked me to be the one to read this. He wanted you both to hear it from somebody who is not in your family. He thought that was important. I have not read this letter myself. He wrote it in my office 6 months ago, sealed it and gave it to me. I am going to read it now. I am going to ask you to please not interrupt. I am going to ask you to listen to all of it before either of you respond." He opened the envelope. He cleared his throat. He began to read. Linnea and Wilder. I am writing this letter on a Wednesday afternoon in March. I am at the hardware store. I am sitting on the small stool behind the front counter. I am writing it because I have not had a way to say what I am about to say in person, and I have known for some time that I would not be able to say it before I died. I am sorry about that. I have always been sorry about that. The men in our family did not learn how to say things in person. We learned how to do other things instead. I'm going to try to explain in this letter what I have been doing instead of saying things. I want both of you to hear it together, because the truth of it has been a thing I have shared with only one person in this family, and the time has come to share it with the other one. I looked at my brother. He was sitting very still. He was not crying yet. Mr. Kekkonen kept reading. Linnea, I want to address you first. I want you to know that I have loved you every day of your life. I have not said the words. I have never said the words to anybody. But I have shown them to you, in the only ways I knew how. I have given you a stable home. I have given you my time. I have shown up to every school event you ever had. I have watched you become the kind of woman who knows how to listen to other people, and I have been proud of you in a way I did not know how to put into words. I am leaving you the house. I am leaving you the larger share of the savings. I am leaving you my mother's small jewelry box, which she gave to me when she died, with instructions to give it to a daughter who reminded me of her. You remind me of her. You have her hands. I want you to have it. I had not been expecting the letter to address me first. I had been bracing for an attack on Wilder. I started crying. Wilder, Mr. Kekkonen continued reading, I want to address you next. I want to start by apologizing for the dinner where I told you I did not believe in your carpentry. I was wrong. I have known I was wrong since about 3 weeks after you walked out. I did not know how to call you back. I had said something I could not unsay, and we are not the kind of men who undo what we have said, even when we know we should. I want you to know I have been carrying that wrong sentence for 12 years. I am sorry. Wilder had started crying. What you do not know, Linnea, is what your brother and I have actually been doing for the last 12 years. I want to tell you because I do not want either of my children to misunderstand the other one after I am gone. Your brother started sending me money, anonymously, in the form of money orders, about 3 months after he left. The money orders arrived at the hardware store every month for 12 years. They were signed only with the words, "From a friend." The handwriting was your brother's. I recognized it the first time. I have never told him I recognized it. I have never cashed any of them. I have kept them in a drawer in the back office of the store. There are 143 money orders in that drawer, totaling $28,600. The drawer is the second one down on the left side of the gray filing cabinet. The key is in my desk. I looked at Wilder. His face had gone white. He had stopped breathing for a second. Wilder also, I have come to learn, paid for my prescription medications for the last 9 years. He arranged this through Mrs. Hjalmar Pelto at Pelto's Pharmacy, who has been our family's pharmacist for 40 years and who is one of my oldest friends. Mrs. Pelto told me about it 3 years ago, by accident, when she misunderstood that I already knew. She had been instructed by Wilder to keep it secret. She had not realized the secret had a leak in it. I asked her to keep doing what she had been doing, which was telling Wilder I did not know, while she also continued telling me that Wilder was paying. I am sorry, Mrs. Pelto, if you are reading this and learning that I knew. You did nothing wrong. We are a family that asks too much of people. I looked at Mr. Kekkonen. Mr. Kekkonen was reading the letter without looking up. He had not been told any of this. He had been my father's lawyer and friend for 30 years, and even he had not been told. The only person who had known the full picture had been Mrs. Pelto, the small, careful pharmacist with the gray bun who had stood in our family's church basement at the funeral last Saturday, with a green coffee cup in her hand, and had nodded at my father's photograph without saying anything to anybody. Mr. Kekkonen kept reading. There was one phone call between us, Wilder. You may remember it. 3 years ago, I called Pelto's Pharmacy to ask about a refill on my heart medication. You answered the phone. You had been visiting Mrs. Pelto, picking up an order for one of your clients, and you had been the one in the front of the store when the phone rang, and Mrs. Pelto had asked you to answer because her hands had been full with another customer. You did not know it was me. I knew it was you. I recognized your voice immediately. You did not hang up. I did not hang up. We talked for 4 minutes about a prescription for a medication you were paying for without knowing I knew. Neither of us said anything other than what was strictly required to discuss the prescription. We did not say hello. We did not say goodbye. You said, "Thank you for calling Pelto's. We will have that ready for you tomorrow." I said, "I will pick it up tomorrow." I hung up. I sat in the back office of the hardware store for an hour after that phone call, and I thought about whether to call you back. I did not call you back. You were waiting for me to call you back. We are both very stubborn men. I am sorry. I am the older one. I should have called you. I want you to know that I have been thinking about that phone call for 3 years. Wilder was crying so hard now that he could not be quiet. Mr. Kekkonen had stopped for a moment to give him a tissue, then kept reading. I am leaving you the hardware store, Wilder. You have not asked for it. You probably do not want it. I am leaving it to you anyway. I am leaving it to you because the store was the thing you and I never figured out how to talk about. The store was supposed to be your inheritance. You made a different choice. I disagreed with the choice. I was wrong to disagree with it. The store is your punishment and your inheritance both. I want you to walk into it every day, for as long as you choose to keep it, and I want you to remember that we never figured out how to be father and son in person. I want you to remember that we were father and son anyway. The store is the proof. So is the drawer with the money orders. So is the prescription bill. So are the 4 minutes you spent on the phone with me about a heart medication you were paying for, while neither of us said the things we were both thinking. The proof is everywhere, Wilder. The proof has been everywhere for 12 years. I am sorry I did not let you see it. I am sorry you did not know I was keeping it. Mr. Kekkonen took a breath. He kept reading. Linnea, I want to apologize to you also for not telling you any of this while I was alive. You have been judging your brother for 12 years. I let you. I let you because the alternative would have required me to admit out loud to my own daughter that I had been participating in a quiet conversation with my son that I had not yet figured out how to make public. I was not ready to be seen knowing what I knew. I am sorry. You have spent 12 years carrying anger on my behalf. You did not need to. I want you to know that the man you have been angry at for 12 years is the same man who has been quietly keeping me alive in ways I never asked him to. He is your brother. He is a good man. He has been a good man this entire time. I want you to forgive him. I want you to forgive him publicly at the dinner table the next time you both sit down together, in a way the rest of the family can see because they are going to need to see it. They have been judging him too. They were not the ones who wrote the letter that asks you to forgive him. I am the one who wrote the letter. The forgiveness is mine to ask of you. Mr. Kekkonen was crying now. He kept reading. My final request. I want both of you to take the box of money orders out of the drawer in the back office of the hardware store. I want you to count them together. I want you to take them, all 143 of them, and I want you to cash them at the bank where I have done my business for 40 years. I want you to take the $28,600, and I want you to do something with it that the two of you decide on together. I do not care what you decide. I do not care if you donate it. I do not care if you split it. I do not care if you spend it on a vacation to Finland to see where our family came from. I want you to decide together. Wilder spent 12 years sending that money to me. I have been keeping it for both of you. Now it is yours to decide what to do with. Decide it together. That is the only inheritance instruction I am giving you that I am not willing to flex on. Mr. Kekkonen paused. He was close to the end. My children, I have loved both of you. I have loved you in the only ways the men in our family have known how to love. I have not been a good speaker of love. I have been a quiet one. I am going to die without having said the words out loud to either of you. I am sorry for that. I am writing them now because I have a chance to write them, and I want them to be in the world somewhere when I am gone. I love both of you. I have always loved both of you. I am proud of both of you. I am proud of the man my son has become, and I am proud of the woman my daughter has become, and I have been proud of both of you every single day of your lives, and I am sorry I did not say it. The men in our family will learn how to say it eventually. Maybe one of you will be the one to teach the next generation. Wilder, if you have children. Linnea, if you have children with Cal. Teach them. Teach them so that when they bury their fathers, they do not have to read a letter to figure out that they were loved. Mr. Kekkonen folded the letter. He put it back in the envelope. He set the envelope on the desk between us. The room was completely silent for almost 2 minutes. Wilder was crying. I was crying. Mr. Kekkonen was crying quietly into his handkerchief. None of us said anything. We did not need to say anything. The letter had said everything that needed to be said, and the letter had been written by a man who had not been able to say it in person, and the saying of it, even after his death, had been the most extraordinary thing my father had ever done. I want to tell you what we did next, because the doing has been the part of the story I have been living inside since. Wilder and I drove to the hardware store that afternoon, after the will reading. Mr. Kekkonen had given us the key to the back office. We unlocked the back room. We found the gray filing cabinet. We opened the second drawer on the left side. We found the box of money orders. There were exactly 143. 12 years of money orders every month, with 3 months missing because of postal disruptions or my father's failure to register 1 or 2 over the years. The amount totaled, when we tallied it together at the small wooden desk in the back office, $28,600 exactly. The math was correct. Our father had counted them. He had been keeping a running tally on a piece of yellow paper at the bottom of the drawer. Wilder and I sat in the back office of the hardware store for almost 3 hours that afternoon. We talked. We talked the way we had not talked since we were children. He told me about the carpentry workshop. He told me about how he had decided to send the money orders. He told me he had known, the entire time, that our father would not cash them, but that he had needed to send them anyway, because it had been the only way he had known how to keep the relationship alive without having to say anything to our father directly. He told me about Mrs. Pelto and the prescriptions. He told me he had gone to her 9 years ago, after he had heard from a cousin that our father had been put on heart medication, and that the medication had been expensive, and that our father had been having trouble affording it. He had set up an arrangement with Mrs. Pelto where he paid the difference, every month, between what insurance covered and what the medication cost. He had asked her to keep it from our father. She had done so for 9 years, except for the one accidental conversation our father had referenced in the letter. He told me about the 4-minute phone call. He told me he had recognized our father's voice immediately. He told me he had been in the front of the pharmacy. He told me he had spent the rest of that day wondering whether our father had recognized his voice too. He told me he had spent the next 3 years convinced our father had not, because if our father had, he would have called back. He told me, in the back office of the hardware store, that learning from the letter that our father had recognized him, and that our father had been waiting for him to call back, was the single hardest piece of information he had ever received. He cried while he told me that. I cried too. We held each other in the back office, between 2 shelves of plumbing fittings and electrical supplies, for a long time. We took the box of money orders to the bank the following Monday. We cashed all 143 of them. The teller, a young woman who had not known our father, did not understand why we were both crying while we deposited a series of old money orders into a single account. She did her job politely. She did not ask. The money was in the account by the end of the day. Wilder and I have had several conversations about what to do with the $28,600. We have not decided yet. We have decided not to be in a hurry. Our father had asked us to decide together, and we have been doing that, slowly, over the months since the funeral. We are leaning toward establishing a small scholarship fund at the local community college, in our father's name, for students from our county who want to pursue a trade. We are not sure yet. We are taking our time. We are doing it together. The doing it together is the part that matters. I want to tell you what I have learned because I think this is the part that may be useful to somebody listening. Some people show love by staying. Some show it by leaving in a way that does not actually leave. The men in my family had been performing distance with each other for generations, because the alternative would have required them to say words they had not been taught how to say. The 12 years between my brother and my father was not silence. It was a long, quiet conversation, conducted in money orders and unanswered phone calls, and one accidental 4-minute exchange about a prescription. The conversation had been real. The conversation had been love. The conversation had not been visible to anybody except the 2 men inside it, and those 2 men had been so accustomed to being unable to say what they were doing that they had nearly let the entire conversation go to waste by failing to confirm it to each other before one of them died. Most love, in some families, looks exactly like its opposite from the outside. It looks like distance. It looks like silence. It looks like a son who walked out and never came back, and a father who never picked up the phone. From the outside, that is exactly what it looks like. The inside of the relationship is where the love is. The inside is where 2 people who do not know how to express what they feel find ways to express it anyway, in the only language they share. Sometimes the language is money orders sent monthly to a hardware store. Sometimes the language is a prescription being quietly paid for by a son who refuses to admit he is doing it. Sometimes the language is a 4-minute phone call that pretends to be only about a refill, but that both people know is also about something much bigger that neither of them is ready to name yet. You will not always be allowed in to see the inside of a relationship in your own family. Some love is not yours to witness. You can only know it existed by what people do not say to each other after one of them is gone. By the small things you find in drawers, by the careful tally on a yellow piece of paper, by the box of 143 money orders that adds up exactly to 12 years of a son trying to tell a father what he had not been able to say out loud. If somebody in your family has been distant for a long time, please consider that you may not be seeing the whole picture. The estrangement may not be what the family has decided it is. There may be a quiet conversation happening between two people that you are not invited to. The conversation may be the most important thing in either of their lives. They may be doing the best they can with the tools their family taught them, which were not enough tools but were the only tools either of them had. You can be angry on somebody's behalf. You can also be wrong about who needs to be defended. When my father died, I had been ready to call my brother out for performing grief at a funeral. I would have been wrong. I would have humiliated him in front of our family. I would have damaged the only sibling I have, possibly permanently, on the basis of a story I had been telling myself for 12 years that was not the actual story. I was saved from doing that by a letter my father had written 6 months before his death, which my father had known would arrive at the right moment, because my father had spent his whole life being a quieter and more observant man than I had given him credit for. He had known I would judge my brother. He had known he would not be alive to correct me. He had written the letter because he had known. The letter was not for Wilder. The letter was for me. My father had been my last teacher. He had taught me, after he was already gone, that love does not always announce itself, and that the people who love you are sometimes the ones you have not been looking at carefully enough. I want to ask you something before you go. Tell me, in the comments, the relationship in your family that looked like estrangement from the outside, but turned out to be something else once you finally got close enough to see what was actually happening inside it. Tell me how you found out. Tell me what changed afterward. Tell me whether you wish you had known sooner. There are more of us walking around with these quiet conversations in our families than the rest of the family ever realizes. Tell me yours. I will be reading every comment. I will see you in the next one.